Welcome, focus learners, to the laboratory. I'm Dr. Chem, and today we're jumping right into a cinematic educational explainer that looks at the very DNA of information. We are going to put statistical data directly under the microscope to decode its hidden structures. In this explainer, we'll master the art of constructing and interpreting histograms, identifying patterns, hunting down outliers, and visualizing the actual shapes of different distributions. So, grab your safety goggles because things are about to get highly analytical.
You know, if you look at any raw dataset, it honestly just looks like noise, right? A totally volatile chaos of numbers. It is completely overwhelming. So how do we actually extract the truth from all that? How do we know for sure if a process is healthy and stable, or if it's got some kind of split personality? Well, the answer lies in our visual diagnostic tools. By organizing these chaotic raw numbers into precise visual instruments, we can suddenly see the actual heartbeat of a process.
Okay, let's dive into this by clearing up a really common misconception right off the bat. People are constantly confusing our primary laboratory instrument, the histogram, with a standard bar chart, but they have entirely different use cases. A bar chart is used for discrete qualitative data, like categories of items, which is exactly why there are gaps between the bars. A histogram, on the other hand, is built for continuous numeric data. There are literally no gaps because the horizontal axis is a continuous number line. But here's the real game changer, the way they measure. In a bar chart, the height tells you everything. But in a histogram, the area of the bars is what represents the frequency.
All right, Section 1, Constructing the Instrument, the histogram.
To truly understand our data, we absolutely must build our tool correctly first. And building a histogram requires absolute precision. First off, we don't just count the number of items in a bin, we calculate the frequency density for each class interval. Next, we establish our continuous axes. Remember, the horizontal axis has got to be a continuous scale spanning our numeric variable, divided into equally sized intervals, or what we call bins. Meanwhile, the vertical axis will represent our calculated frequency density. Finally, we draw our bars for each interval, using that frequency density as the height.
So the absolutely crucial point here, the golden rule of the histogram, is that the area of the bars represents the frequencies. The total area of all the bars combined is proportional to the total frequency of your entire data set. Because we're using continuous bins along that x-axis, taking the width of the bin and multiplying it by the frequency density height gives us the true area, and therefore it gives us the true count of observations in that very precise range.
Moving on to Section 2, Diagnosing the Distribution, the Anatomy of Shapes.
Once our instrument is fully constructed, the shape it reveals tells us an incredible story about the behavior of our data. Now, what's super interesting here is how the physical shape of the data actually tugs at our key metrics. In a perfectly symmetrical bell-shaped distribution, the mean, median, and mode are all equal. They just sit happily right in the center. But when a dataset is positively skewed, meaning it's got this long tail pulling off to the right, that extreme right tail drags the mean up so it becomes the highest value, essentially leaving the mode behind. Conversely, in a negatively skewed or left-skewed distribution, the tail pulls hard to the left. That drags the mean down to be the lowest of the three, while the mode stays put as the highest point on the chart.
But skewness isn't the only diagnostic shape we're looking for here. We also have to examine the peak of the data, which is known as kurtosis. Think of our first condition, leptokurtic, as highly concentrated chemical data. The histogram features a much taller, sharper peak than normal. It tells us that our data is densely concentrated right around the mean. But beware, because it also has fatter tails, which means there's a greater occurrence of extreme outlier values just lurking on the edges.
Now contrast that with our next condition, platykurtic. This is the exact opposite. The distribution here is much flatter and broader than your standard normal curve. It's indicating a really even spread of data values across the whole spectrum. And because the tails are thinner, a platykurtic distribution tells us there are far fewer rogue elements or extreme outliers hiding out in our dataset.
Of course, to accurately diagnose all these variations, we really need a baseline of perfect stability. And that baseline is the normal distribution, the classic unimodal symmetrical bell curve. It's governed by this kind of mathematical perfection known as the empirical rule. In a stable normal distribution, 68% of your data will always lie within one standard deviation of the mean. 95% falls within two standard deviations, and an absolutely incredible 99.7% of your data is contained within three standard deviations. This kind of predictability, it's the gold standard for process stability.
Which brings us to Section 3, the split personality, diagnosing bimodal data.
So what happens when our laboratory results show not just one peak, but two? Well, alarms should be going off in your head. When you map your data and you see a bimodal distribution, which is characterized by two distinct peaks separated by a noticeable valley, you absolutely must not view it as one broken process. Instead, it's signaling that you actually have two entirely different subpopulations, essentially two different processes that you've mistakenly mixed together in the same beaker and analyzed as if they were one. And I need to explain why this is a massive red flag for any data analyst or Lean Six Sigma practitioner out there. If you just ignore the two peaks and calculate the average of this polluted dataset, your average is going to fall right down into the valley between the peaks. It creates what is known as a mathematical ghost. It's a value that almost never actually occurs in real life, and yet you might literally be basing your entire business strategy on it. No way, right?
This brilliantly illustrates the danger in the real world. Just imagine a logistics company analyzing their order lead times. The histogram shows a peak at 2 hours, and then another peak way over at 5 hours. The manager calculates the average as 3.5 hours and sets all their performance goals around it. But that 3.5-hour average is a ghost. By digging just a little deeper, we realize the 2-hour peak represents digital orders, and the 5-hour peak represents manual phone orders. We literally have two entirely different processes, masquerading as one.
To cure this split personality, we use a specific Lean Six Sigma technique called stratification. First up is data segmentation. We tag every single data point by its source. Was this from the day shift or the night shift? Was it digital or manual? Second, comparative analysis. We generate separate histograms for each tag just to prove that they are in fact two separate, stable, unimodal processes. And finally, standardization. We update our standard operating procedures to align the processes, aiming to unify them all back into a single, predictable peak.
Section 4. Hunting down the outliers. Isolating rogue variables.
In this final phase of our laboratory work, we are hunting down rogue variables. Because even in a perfectly unimodal process, we often find statistical anomalies that just refuse to conform. We call them outliers. They are values that fall far, far away from the rest of the dataset. And as we saw earlier with those skewed shapes, outliers act like a gravitational force. They pull heavily on the mean and completely distort the reality of the process. When extreme outliers are present in our data, relying on the mean and the range can be super misleading, which is exactly why analysts will often pivot to using the median and the interquartile range instead, just to get a much truer summary of the center and the spread. Now, if you map out something like transaction amounts, you can clearly see the absolute beauty of histograms as a non-parametric method. We don't have to assume the data fits a perfect, symmetrical normal distribution beforehand. By simply plotting the data into bins without any prior structural assumptions, the visual naturally isolates these rare occurrences. You can easily spot the bins on the far edges where the frequency density drops incredibly low. That instantly exposes those isolated pockets of rogue data points. By taking the instrument we constructed earlier and essentially weaponizing it, we can perform advanced histogram-based outlier detection. Because it maps continuous data without assuming normality, it naturally highlights bins with exceptionally low frequencies. In advanced computer science and big data modeling, systems actually use algorithms like the Adjusted Histogram-Based Outlier Score, or AHBOS, which calculates the density of these bins to automatically flag instances that deviate way too far from the norm. It's a remarkably powerful, dynamic way to spot anomalies in massive, massive datasets. Well, we've successfully decoded the histogram, diagnosed distribution shapes, cured bimodal split personalities, and hunted down those pesky outliers. But my final question to you is this. Think about the data you consume every single day. Look at the averages reported in your business, in the news, or even just in your own life. Are those averages real, or are they mathematical ghosts? What hidden bimodal distributions and rogue outliers might be lurking right beneath them, just waiting to be diagnosed? Put on your lab coat, build your histogram, and find out. Stay curious, focused learners.